To the returning viewers, welcome back. To new viewers, welcome to the channel, guys. Hope you're well. If someone could put a "I'm well" at the bottom of the comment section, that'd be great. But I digress. Today, we're going to be looking at another comparative. And in a previous video, I did a comparative of the 5600X versus the 5600 versus the 5600G. And there was a lot of questions that still came out of that. So I'm going to try and address those questions in this today. Now, what are we doing today? We're going to be looking at the best current gaming CPU that is best for budget and best for pocket. Now, the CPUs that we are going to be comparing is the 7600, the 7600X, and the 13600K. I did want to do the 13600, however, that disappeared faster than the ANC's promise to end load shedding. Now, it's always a good idea to compare specs and what a CPU can do so that you can make the best and most informed decision before making your purchase. As an example of this, the 7600 and 7600X both have 6 cores and 12 threads. However, the 7600X has a higher TDP, meaning that you're going to have to factor in more power and/or cooling. In contrast, the 13600K has a mammoth 14 cores and 20 threads, making it great for multitasking, but does have a little bit less L3 cache, which can impact its gaming performance. Lastly, one of the most important factors that we have to consider is a price. Now, we can note that on current SRPs, the 7600 comes in at the most price efficient, with the 7600X coming in next, and the most expensive of these 3 options being the 13600K. This is based off of current prices as well as SRPs. Now, we're going to do a side-by-side on specs, but before we jump into that, I do need to note that the Intel 13600K does have support for DDR4 as well as DDR5. So depending on your current setup, it is a very important consideration to consider. Starting off with the 7600, it is a 6-core 12-thread processor. It has a base clock of 3.8 and boosts all the way up to 5.1. It has a L1 cache of 384 kilobits, a L2 cache of 6 megabytes, and an L3 cache of 32 megabytes. Default TDP is 65 watts. Its socket set is AM5, which is an important consideration to make when deciding on a motherboard. Now, on connectivity, it has a PCIe 5 capability, but note that it does only support DDR5. The 7600 is also a 6-core 12-thread processor with integrated graphics in AMD Radeon graphics. It has a base clock of 4.7 and pushes all the way up to 5.3. L1 cache of 384 kilobits, exactly the same as the 7600. The L2 of 6 megabytes, exactly the same as the 7600, and the L3 cache again at 32 megabytes. Default TDP higher than the 7600 in 105. The CPU socket is AM5, and again, you need to consider this when looking at your motherboard. It does have capability for PCIe 5 on connectivity, and it does only support DDR5. Now, it is a little bit different when we get to the 13600K, but I will try and compare like for like as much as I can. It is a 14-core, 20-thread processor. However, it is made up of 6 performance cores and 8 efficiency cores. It does have integrated graphics in the Intel UHD Graphics 770. Now, if you're looking at the efficiency cores, it has a base core frequency of 2.6 and boosts up to 3.9, but on the performance cores, it has a base of 3.5 and boosts all the way up to 5.1. Now, the caches are going to be different owing to the performance and efficiency cores, but on the L2 cache, it has 20 megabytes, and the L3 shared cache is 24 megabytes. Last but not least, it does support DDR4 as well as DDR5, and the socket set is the LGA 1700. Again, need to consider this for your motherboard. Moving on to the most important thing, and that is gaming performance. Note a 4090 was used to avoid any bottlenecks across all 3 CPUs. Starting off with the Cinebench R23 multi-core performance, higher being better. The 7600 came in last with a 14344. The 7600X got a 15315. and the 13600K got a 24525. Looking at single core performance, pretty even across all. The 7600 with a 1932, the 7600X with a 1976, and the 13600K with a 2021. Onto gaming performance, and the first game being Hitman 3 on 1080p with high settings. 1080p because this is what pushes the CPU the most. We have average as well as 1% low. Starting off with the 7600, we had a 223 on average with a 122 on 1% low. The 7600 had a 229 on average with a 126 on the 1% low, and the 13600K had a 221 on average and a 124 on the 1% lows. So pretty stock standard across all of them, with a slight edge on the 7600X. Horizon Zero Dawn on 1080, but favoring quality. On the 7600, we had a 247 on average with 174 on low. On the 7600X, we had a 249 on average with 175 on the 1% low, and the 13600K coming in last there with an average of 197 and a 1% low of 147. Lastly, Cyberpunk 2077 1080p on medium, the 7600 having an average of 188 with 171 on the average lows. The 7600X slightly higher on the averages with a 197 and a 174 on the 1% lows. Winning the overall on Cyberpunk was the 13600K with an average of 202, but in the ballpark on the 1% lows of 173. On to conclusion and who wins. Now note that we are looking at this from an entry-level gaming CPU perspective. The winner for me is the 7600, and I'll tell you why. The price difference can be argued against the 7600X in that it's very negligible. However, the TDPs of the 7600 are fantastic, and it does allow you to be able to overclock and reach that slight loss that you might have got from the 7600. Again, you can argue that the 7600X can be overclocked too, but it's potato. For me, the 7600 wins because of the low TDP and the lowest price. In second place is the 7600X for all the reasons that I stated in the 7600. Now, that means that the 13600K comes in last, but it actually really doesn't. This is because we're looking at this from a pure gaming budget perspective. If the price on the 13600K was around about 500 to 1,000 Rand cheaper, I think that it would pip all of them and become the number one based on overall efficiency. However, if you are looking at the 13600K from a multitasking perspective, it beats all three. So again, this is why you need to make all of these considerations, because if we're looking at this from I'm just going to buy a CPU and I want a game, that's when I say the 7600 or maybe the 7600X. However, if you are a streamer or you are using multiple applications where you need more cores, I would say the 13600K is more of a consideration owing to the fact that you are going to need those extra cores to balance off the programs that are running in the background. As a side note, I never thought that I would say that a entry-level CPU has 14 cores and 20 threads. To wrap up, depending on your situation, I hope that you can make a more informed decision on what is the best CPU for you. If you do have any questions, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you like this video, please let me know so I can make more of them. Guys, look forward to seeing you on the next video. Cheers and goodbye.